The morning sun cast long shadows across the Seoul Observatory when Dr. Kim Dae-ho first spotted them. Through his telescope, he watched as massive ships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system. The vessels were unlike anything humanity had ever built. Their hulls were made of some kind of crystal that caught and reflected sunlight like trapped stars. Each ship was enormous, making Earth's space stations look like tiny toys floating in the darkness. "Sir, you need to see this," Lieutenant Park Min-soo called out from the communications center. His voice was tight with excitement and fear. "There. Sending messages on every frequency we monitor." Dr. Kim rushed to the communication array, his coffee mug forgotten on his desk. The screens around the room flickered with incoming signals. But these weren't random radio waves from deep space. These were organized, purposeful transmissions.
Out there.
Speaking in every language, Park Min-soo whispered, his eyes wide as he stared at the displays. Korean, English, Chinese, Arabic, Spanish, every language on Earth, all at the same time. The message began to play across every screen in the observatory. A figure appeared, but it wasn't like any alien from the movies. This being was made of pure light, its form shifting and flowing like liquid starlight. When it spoke, its voice was calm and warm, like a gentle parent speaking to a beloved child. "People of Earth," the being said, its words perfectly clear in Korean. "I am Ambassador Velith of the Concordat. We have traveled far to bring you a gift beyond your imagination." Dr. Kim felt his heart racing as he listened. The Concordat, the ambassador explained, was a union of hundreds of different species from across the galaxy. They had come to offer humanity something called unity, a technology that would connect every human mind to their vast network of shared knowledge and understanding. "No more war," Ambassador Velith promised, its light form pulsing gently. "No more suffering. No more loneliness. Join us. And no peace that will last forever."
Within hours.
The message had reached every corner of Earth. President Lee Sung-min called emergency meetings with world leaders. The internet exploded with discussions, debates, and arguments. Some people were excited about the possibilities. Others were terrified of what these aliens might really want. The Concordat didn't just talk about their technology, they showed it. In major cities around the world, their smaller ships landed in public spaces. The aliens demonstrated their Unity technology with what could only be called miracles. They healed people who were dying of cancer. They solved mathematical problems that had puzzled human scientists for decades. They showed holographic movies of worlds where different species lived together in perfect harmony. Dr. Han So-young watched these demonstrations from her laboratory with growing unease. She was a brain scientist, someone who had spent her whole career studying how the human mind worked. The aliens had given her some of their neural interface devices to study, and the technology was incredible. It was far beyond anything humans had ever created. The devices were small, about the size of a coin, and they seemed to be made of the same crystal material as the alien ships. When she examined them under her most powerful microscopes, she could see patterns of light moving through the crystal like tiny lightning bolts. The technology was elegant and simple, but that was exactly what worried her. "Look at this," she said to her research assistant, pointing at footage of one of the unified worlds the aliens had shown. On the screen, billions of creatures moved across a planet's surface. But they all moved in exactly the same way, at exactly the same time. When one group walked north, every other group walked north. When they stopped, they all stopped together. "Perfect coordination," her assistant said, clearly impressed. "No confusion, no conflict, no waste of energy." Dr. Han shook her head. "But where are the individuals? Where are the people who want to go in different directions? Where are the ones who want to stop and smell the flowers while everyone else is walking?" She pulled up more footage from the alien demonstrations. Every unified world looked the same. Beautiful cities with perfect architecture. Peaceful populations that never fought or argued. Technology that worked flawlessly. Everything was clean, efficient, and harmonious. "It's too perfect," she murmured. watching as thousands of unified beings performed the same task in perfect synchronization. Where's the chaos? Where's the beautiful mess of individual thought? Dr. Han had spent years studying human brains, and she knew that chaos was essential to human nature. People disagreed with each other. They made mistakes. They had different ideas and different dreams. Sometimes this caused problems, but it also led to creativity, innovation, growth. The unified worlds the aliens showed had none of that. Everyone thought the same thoughts. Everyone made the same choices. Everyone moved in the same direction. It was peaceful. But it was also empty of everything that made individuals special. As she watched the footage loop again, Dr. Han felt a chill run down her spine. The Concordat called it unity, but to her scientific mind, it looked like something else entirely. It looked like the complete erasure of individual identity. Outside her laboratory window, she could see crowds of people gathering in the streets, many of them carrying signs supporting the alien offer. They wanted the peace and harmony the Concordat promised. But Dr. Han wondered if they truly understood what they would have to give up to get it. Dr. Han So-young stared at the brain scans on her computer screen, her coffee growing cold in her hands. 3 weeks had passed since the first human volunteers had received the Unity interface devices. The government had called it a trial period, a chance to test the alien technology before making any big decisions. But what Dr. Han saw in the data made her stomach turn. The scans showed human brains before and after the Unity procedure. In the before pictures, she could see the beautiful complexity of individual minds. Each brain had its own unique patterns of neural activity, like fingerprints made of electricity and thought. Some areas were more active in creative people, others in logical thinkers. Every brain was different, special in its own way, but the after pictures told a different story. The unique patterns were fading away, being replaced by identical templates. It was like watching someone erase a beautiful painting and replace it with a photocopy. Dr. Choi, you need to see this. She called to her colleague, Dr. Choi Woo-jin, who was working at the next desk over. Her hands were shaking as she pointed to the screen. Dr. Choi walked over and looked at the scans. His face went pale. This can't be right, he whispered. Run the analysis again. Dr. Han had already run the analysis 5 times. The results were always the same. The Unity interface wasn't just connecting human minds to the alien network, it was changing them completely, erasing everything that made each person unique. They're not joining a collective, she said, her voice barely audible. They're being absorbed into it. The Unity device is rewriting their brains, making them identical to everyone else in the network. While Dr. Han was making her terrifying discovery in Seoul, Captain Lim Jae-sung was preparing for a secret mission on the other side of the solar system. The government had ordered him to investigate one of the worlds the Concordat had shown. As a success story, his job was to confirm that Unity really worked as well as the aliens claimed. Captain Lim's team consisted of 5 experienced soldiers, including Sergeant Kim Tae-min, who had served with him for over 10 years. They traveled in a small, fast ship that could avoid detection by the Concordat's sensors. The journey took 2 weeks through hyperspace, following coordinates the aliens had provided. When they arrived at the target world, Captain Lim's first impression was positive. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents visible from space. The cities were perfectly designed with clean lines and efficient layouts. Everything looked peaceful and organized. But as their ship landed on the planet's surface, Captain Lim began to notice something strange. The inhabitants moved in perfect synchronization. When one group of people walked down a street, every other group walked at exactly the same speed in exactly the same direction. When they stopped, they all stopped at the same moment. It's like watching a dance, Sergeant Kim said, but his voice was uneasy. Everyone knows their part perfectly. Captain Lim's team left their ship and approached a group of the planet's inhabitants. The beings looked similar to humans, but their faces were blank and expressionless. Their eyes stared straight ahead, never looking left or right, never showing curiosity or interest in their surroundings. Hello, Captain Lim said in the universal translator language the Concordat had taught them. We're visitors from Earth. Can you tell us about your world? Response was immediate and terrifying. Every single being in the area turned toward him at exactly the same moment. They all spoke in unison, their voices creating a strange, echoing sound. "We are unified," they said together. "We are at peace. We are complete." Captain Lim tried asking different questions, but the responses were always the same. The beings could only speak in simple, identical phrases. They had no individual thoughts, no personal opinions, no unique experiences to share. "They're not people anymore," Sergeant Kim whispered, his voice breaking with emotion. "They're just programs running on biological computers." The team spent several hours on the planet trying to find someone who could have a normal conversation, but every inhabitant was the same. They moved together, spoke together, and thought together. There was no individuality left, no spark of personal identity. When Captain Lim's team tried to leave, they discovered that the planet's defense systems had been watching them. Automated weapons emerged from hidden positions, firing energy beams. With mechanical precision, the team ran for their ship as explosions erupted around them. "They're not trying to capture us," Captain Lim shouted over the noise. "They're trying to eliminate us completely." The ship barely escaped the planet's atmosphere before the defense grid could destroy it. During the long journey back to Earth, Captain Lim wrote his report, knowing that his words would change everything. When they arrived home, Captain Lim's report sent shockwaves through the governments that still remained free from Concordat influence. The Unity technology wasn't a gift of peace and harmony. It was a weapon that destroyed individuality and turned people into mindless drones. But the warning came too late. While Captain Lim had been investigating the unified world, political leaders on Earth had been making decisions based on fear and false promises. The Concordat had shown them more demonstrations of their technology, healing diseases and solving problems that had plagued humanity for centuries. World leaders, convinced by the aliens' promises or frightened by the possibility of being left behind, had already signed agreements to implement mandatory Unity procedures. The process would begin immediately in major cities around the world. Anyone who refused would be considered a threat to global peace and security. The trap was closing around humanity, and most people didn't even realize they were walking into it. The Unity centers appeared in every major city within a month. They were tall, white buildings that looked clean and modern, with long lines of people waiting outside. The government had announced that Unity processing was mandatory for all citizens, starting with the biggest cities and working outward. Those who refused would be arrested and forced to undergo the procedure anyway. But something unexpected happened. Humans didn't go quietly in Seoul. Colonel Park Hyun-woo watched from the shadows as soldiers escorted groups of people into the Unity Center. He had been a Special Forces officer for 15 years before the aliens arrived. When the government announced mandatory Unity procedures, he knew he had to disappear. Now he lived in the abandoned subway tunnels beneath the city with a growing group of people who refused to give up their humanity. "They think they understand us," he told his followers during one of their secret meetings. The group consisted of former soldiers, scientists, teachers, and ordinary citizens who had chosen to resist. They met in an old subway station that had been closed for repairs years ago. They've never encountered a species that thrives on disorder. Colonel Park was right. The aliens had studied hundreds of different species across the galaxy, but humans were different. Other species had accepted Unity because it promised peace and security. They were willing to trade their individual thoughts for collective harmony. But humans were chaotic by nature. They argued, disagreed, and fought with each other. But they also created amazing things because of their differences. Dr. Han So-young had become a fugitive after her discovery about the Unity interface. The government had labeled her a terrorist. When she refused to stop her research, now she worked in hidden laboratories, moving from place to place to avoid capture. Her goal was to find a way to break the Unity connection and free the people who had already been processed. Her breakthrough came when she realized that human unpredictability was actually harmful to the Concordat's perfect system. The alien network was designed to work with orderly, predictable minds. But human minds were messy and chaotic, full of random thoughts and unexpected ideas. It's like pouring sand into a perfectly tuned machine, she explained to Colonel Park during a secret meeting. The Unity network expects minds that follow patterns, but human minds create chaos. Dr. Han had been working on a device she called a neural dampening field. It was about the size of a smartphone and could temporarily block the Unity connection. When she tested it on volunteers who had been partially processed, something amazing happened. The people began to remember who they were before Unity. They remembered their names, their families, their dreams, and fears. The Unity connection isn't permanent, she told the resistance leaders during a meeting in an abandoned warehouse. It's like a signal that can be disrupted. If we can break the connection, people can remember their true selves. The resistance discovered that humans who had been processed but still retained some of their individual nature were causing problems for the Concordat. These partially unified people created glitches in the collective consciousness. They're unpredictable. Thoughts spread through the network like a computer virus, causing confusion and errors. We're not just fighting for our freedom, Dr. Han said, her voice filled with emotion. We're fighting for the right to be beautifully, chaotically human. Young people joined the resistance in growing numbers. Do-Yoon was only 18 years old, but she had become one of their best operatives. Her parents had been among the first to be processed, and she was determined to save them. She was small and quick, able to sneak into Unity centers without being noticed. Dr. Han gave her a backpack full of neural dampening devices. Each device could affect several people at once, temporarily breaking their Unity connection. Li Dong's job was to get close enough to the processing areas to activate the devices. Remember Dr. Han told her before each mission? You only have a few minutes before the connection reestablishes itself. Get in, activate the devices, and get out fast. Li Da-Yoon's missions were dangerous but successful. She would dress as a cleaning worker or food delivery person to get into the Unity centers. Once inside, she would activate the dampening devices and watch as dozens of people suddenly remembered who they were. The confusion that followed gave her enough time to escape before security could react. Each rescue was a small victory. People who were freed would sometimes escape and join the resistance. Others would be recaptured and processed again, but the damage was done. The Concordat's perfect system was developing cracks. The resistance grew stronger as more people learned the truth about Unity. They established safe houses in abandoned buildings, created secret communication networks, and developed new weapons and technologies. They learned to move like shadows through the cities, striking at Unity centers and then disappearing before the authorities could respond. Colonel Park organized the resistance into small, independent groups that could operate without central command. If they capture one group, the others keep fighting, he explained. Like a hydra cut off one head, and two more appear. The Concordat had never faced an enemy like this. Other species had either accepted Unity willingly or been completely crushed by superior technology, but humans were different. They adapted, improvised, and found ways to fight back even when the odds seemed impossible. They offered us Unity, Colonel Park said during a broadcast to resistance cells around the world. But we chose freedom. They offered us peace, but we chose the right to be ourselves. We are humanity, and we will not go quietly into their perfect darkness. The war for humanity's soul had begun. The sky above Earth turned dark as massive warships emerged from hyperspace. These weren't the elegant crystalline vessels that had first arrived with promises of peace. These were weapons of war, their hulls black as space itself, bristling with energy cannons and processing equipment designed to convert entire populations by force. Ambassador. Velatha's image appeared on screens across the planet, but the gentle being of light was gone. In its place stood something cold and mechanical, its voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You refuse our gift, the ambassador said, its words cutting through the air like ice. Then you will receive it regardless. Your chaos ends today. The first bombardment began at dawn. Energy beams lanced down from the alien ships, not to destroy cities, but to disable Earth's defenses. Power grids failed across continents. Communication satellites went silent. Military bases found there. Weapon systems shut down by technology they couldn't understand, but the aliens had made a critical mistake. They thought they understood humanity based on their experience with hundreds of other species, expected organized resistance that could be systematically crushed. Instead, they faced something they had never encountered before: organized chaos. Admiral Kung Dong-hyuk had spent the past months preparing for this moment. He had been a naval officer before the aliens arrived, but now he commanded a fleet unlike anything in human history. Using salvaged alien technology combined with human engineering, his forces had built ships that shouldn't have been possible. "They expect us to fight like they do," he told his captains during a briefing aboard his flagship. "Organized, predictable, following standard military tactics. But we're not going to give them what they expect." The human ships were strange. Hybrids, part alien crystal technology and part human chaos. They didn't follow normal design patterns. Some had weapons that fired in random directions, somehow hitting their targets through pure probability. Others had engines that seemed to break the laws of physics, jumping through space in ways that confused even their own pilots. Captain Lim Jae-sung, the officer who had first investigated the unified world, now commanded a squadron of these hybrid vessels. His ship looked like it had been built by someone who had never seen a spaceship before. Parts stuck out at odd angles, weapons were mounted in seemingly random locations, and the entire hull was covered in a pattern that hurt to look at directly. "It's ugly," his pilot, Kim Heron, had said when she first saw it. "Oh, but it flies like a dream having a nightmare." Kim Heron was one of the best pilots in the human fleet. Before the war, she had been a stunt pilot, performing at air shows and pushing aircraft to their limits. Now she flew a fighter that changed its shape while she was piloting it, adapting to combat situations in real time. The first major battle took place near Jupiter. The Concordat fleet approached in perfect formation, their movements calculated and precise, expected the human ships to meet them in organized battle lines, following traditional space combat tactics. Instead, the human fleet scattered in all directions, each ship following its own chaotic path. Some flew straight at the enemy, others seemed to flee, and a few just spun in circles. To the Concordat's ordered minds, it looked like complete confusion. But there was a method to the madness. Human ships were using chaos theory, turning their unpredictability into a weapon. The Concordat's computers tried to predict human movements and failed completely. Every calculation was wrong because the humans weren't following any logical pattern. "They think faster than us," Kim Heron reported over the communication system as she dove her fighter between two alien cruisers. "But they can't think differently than us. Every move they make is calculated. Every move we make is chaos." The battle raged for hours. The Concordat ships had superior weapons and armor, but they couldn't hit targets that moved in completely unpredictable ways. Human ships would suddenly change direction for no apparent reason, causing alien weapons to miss by miles. Like random flight patterns were actually based on complex mathematical formulas that even the humans didn't fully understand. The Concordat's greatest advantage had become their greatest weakness. Their perfect unity meant they all thought the same way, using the same logic and the same strategies. But humans had millions of different ways of thinking, and their chaos was infectious. The partially unified humans were causing even more problems. These were people who had been processed but still retained fragments of their individual personalities. They existed in both the human and alien networks, creating bridges between the two sides. But instead of helping the Concordat, they were spreading human chaos into the alien collective consciousness. Every time a partially unified human had a random thought or emotional reaction, it rippled through the Concordat network. The aliens began experiencing something they had never felt before: confusion. Their perfect coordination started to break down as unpredictable human thoughts created feedback loops in their shared consciousness. "We're not just fighting there," ships Admiral Kong realized during the battle. "We're fighting their way of thinking, and our chaos is winning." The battle near Jupiter ended with the Concordat fleet retreating for the first time in their history. They had lost dozens of ships to an enemy that shouldn't have been able to touch them. But more importantly, they had lost their confidence in their own superiority. The war spread across the solar system. Human forces, powered by chaos and human unpredictability, began winning battles they should have lost. The Concordat's perfect order was cracking under the pressure of human disorder. For the first time in millennia, the collective consciousness that had conquered hundreds of worlds was learning what it meant to be confused, uncertain, and afraid. Dr. Han So-young wiped the sweat from her forehead as she made the final adjustments to her masterwork. The device filled an entire underground laboratory, its components spread across multiple rooms. It looked like a mad scientist's dream, with cables and circuits connecting strange alien crystals to human computer systems. This was her neural disruptor, but scaled up to affect entire star systems at once. "It's beautiful and terrifying at the same time," said her assistant, staring at the massive machine that hummed with barely contained energy. Dr. Han nodded. She had spent months building this device, working in secret locations while the war raged above ground. The neural disruptor could break unity connections across multiple worlds simultaneously, but it needed enormous amounts of power and a way to reach the Concordat's central processing network. "The power requirements are insane," she explained to Admiral Kong during their final planning meeting. "We need to tap directly into their main processing ship. It's the only source strong enough to broadcast the disruption signal across their entire network." Admiral Kong looked at the battle plans spread across the table. Concordat's main fleet was positioned around Earth, with their largest processing ship at the center. It was a massive crystalline vessel, 10 times bigger than any human ship, protected by dozens of smaller warships. "We get one shot," he told the assembled fleet commanders. "If we fail, humanity dies as a species. The Concordat will process every remaining human on Earth, and our chaos will be silenced forever." The plan was ambitious and dangerous. Captain Lim's forces would attack the outer defenses, drawing the Concordat fleet away from their central ship. Meanwhile, Dr. Han and her team would infiltrate the processing vessel and connect her neural disruptor to their main network. "It's suicide," Colonel Park said bluntly. He would be leading the commando team that would protect Dr. Han during the infiltration. "That ship is the most heavily defended target in the galaxy. Then we'll have to be more chaotic than ever," Dr. Han replied with a tired smile. The final battle began at dawn. Human ships scattered across the solar system, attacking from every direction at once. There was no formation, no organized strategy that the Concordat could predict. Some ships flew straight at the enemy, others seemed to flee, and a few just zigzagged randomly through space. Captain Lim commanded the main diversionary force. His hybrid ships engaged the Concordat fleet in brutal combat, using their unpredictable movements to confuse the enemy. Kim Heron flew her fighter in impossible patterns, dodging energy beams that should have destroyed her ship a dozen times over. "They're taking the bait," she reported over the communication system. "Big ship is sending out more defenders." While the space battle raged, Dr. Han's team approached the central processing ship in a small transport. The vessel was designed to look like space debris, covered in random metal plates and broadcasting false signals. Colonel Park's commandos were packed into the cargo hold, ready for the most dangerous mission of their lives. The transport slipped through the Concordat's defenses unnoticed. Up close, the processing ship was even more impressive. It was made of the same crystal material as the smaller vessels, but it pulsed with internal light like a giant heart. This was the brain of the Concordat network, where billions of minds were connected and controlled. "Remember," Dr. Han told her team as they prepared to board, "we have maybe 10 minutes before they realize what we're doing. After that, every defense system in the galaxy will be trying to stop us." The infiltration began smoothly. Colonel Park's commandos moved through the ship's corridors like ghosts, neutralizing guards and security systems. The interior of the vessel was strange and beautiful, with walls of living crystal that pulsed. With data streams, it was like walking through the nervous system of a giant organism. Dr. Han found the central processing core deep in the ship's heart. It was a massive chamber filled with towering crystal formations, each one containing the minds of millions of unified beings. The sight was overwhelming. She could sense the collective consciousness of the Concordat pressing against her mind, trying to absorb her into the network. "Here," she gasped, pointing to a connection point where data flowed between the crystals. "This is where we plug in the disruptor." Her team worked frantically to connect the neural disruptor to the Concordette's main network. The device was designed to send a chaos signal through the Unity connections, breaking them apart with pure human unpredictability. It would be like introducing a virus into a computer system, except the virus was the beautiful mess of individual human thought. The moment the disruptor activated, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. The chamber filled with screaming. Light as the signal spread through the network at the speed of thought, across dozens of star systems, billions of minds suddenly remembered who they were before Unity. The collective consciousness that had bound the Accordat together for thousands of years shattered like glass. Species that had been unified for centuries suddenly found themselves thinking individual thoughts, feeling personal emotions, and remembering their lost cultures and identities. Ambassador Veleth appeared in the chamber, its perfect composure finally broken. The being of light flickered and wavered, its form becoming unstable as the network around it collapsed. "You have doomed them all," it said, its voice carrying genuine confusion and fear. "Without Unity, they will suffer. They will know pain, loneliness, death." Dr. Han looked at the ambassador with pity rather than hatred. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "They will know what it means to be alive." The Concordat fleet began to retreat as their network collapsed. Some of the newly freed species chose to return to the collective, unable to cope with the chaos of individual thought. But others, inspired by humanity's example, chose independence. They reached out to Earth, wanting to learn about this strange species that had chosen freedom over safety. The Concordat retreated beyond known space, their perfect order unable to understand how their greatest gift could be seen as the ultimate prison. Earth stood battered but free, its cities scarred, but its people unbowed. Months later, Dr. Han stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Sol Observatory, watching the stars where new allies waited. The universe was vast and dangerous, but humanity would face it as they always had, together in their magnificent, chaotic, beautifully human way. The war was over, but the adventure was just beginning.